Central High School, inside the northern city limits of Knoxville, Tennessee, has a long history and tradition of excellence in academics, sports, and the arts. The current school building opened in the early 1970s. However, Central's original location is a few blocks away and now houses Gresham Middle School. Located in the historic Fountain City community, these schools have long been a center of pride for the surrounding residents.
I'm David Dixon. I came to Gresham and Central in 1982 at the request of Norman Woodall to serve as an assistant band director. Since then, I've heard so much about this band program. Not only is it the oldest band in the Knox County area, but we have a rich heritage of memorabilia from its past. With the passing of Norman Woodall in 2002, I began thinking about some of the past stories of the band that he had told me. Some of them were even stories that Odell Willis had told him about the 40s and 50s history of the band. I began scanning some of our oldest photographs, at first simply for preservation, but that led to the creation of this project. One of the first things I discovered was that despite having been here for almost a quarter of a century, there's still a lot of the history of the band that I had no idea about. I'm just sorry that I can't include all of the stories that I've heard throughout this project. The most amazing thing for me, though, has been meeting so many alumni. The Central Band still holds a special place in the memory of so many of them, some even 60 years later. With their help, I'm proud to be able to bring you this story.
Here's a brief view of some highlights from the documentary. It begins with the early years of the Central High School Band, which had its inception during the time of Principal Hassie K. Gresham. The 1927-1928 annual included a photograph of the first band, along with co-directors Neil Gray and C.C. Cottrell. An all-male group during the 1920s, the band gradually grew in size, but had to be suspended during the Depression. The 1930s brought a new school building through the efforts of Miss Gresham, and with her insistence, a new director was hired in 1935 to restart the band. Helen Minot Harris is a Central alumnus whose future husband was in that renewed organization in fall 1935.
Miss Gresham introduced him. This is our new band director, and his name is Malcolm Morrison. And he said, I want you all to look in your attics anywhere and find band instruments.
To support the band for their first performance, Miss Gresham allowed students to miss school to go to the parade to cheer for the band. This was evidently a rare occurrence.
That was a first, I believe. She was wanted to be so helpful.
Beecher Mize, a tuba player during Malcolm Morrison's 2 years as director, passed along stories to his son, Ron.
During his growing up years, they were able to give him 13 piano lessons at 25 cents a piece. And from there, he was kind of self-taught. When he got to Central, it got to the point where they had an extra sousaphone. Charlie Bullard was already playing in the band at the time, and they were needing another player. So Charlie came over to Dad's house one night and taught him the fingering on the sousaphone, and the next day he joined the band. So I think that was his background as far as getting into it.
Odell Willis came to Central in fall 1937 for the start of what would become a legendary career. He began rapidly developing the band program, and Reba Inkelbarger Haynes shares vivid memories of the new director.
When Mr. Willis came to Central High School in 1937, he, in just a few short years, turned what was just an ordinary program into a super program.
She was one of the first 2 women to play in the concert band and one of the first 2 majorettes.
We had no training. We just did a few things and marched and strutted. They liked for you to strut back then, so you had to rear back and strut, and they thought that was good. I did a little bit of gymnastics, too. See, I did the back bend. And
So this is you?
That's me.
Oh my gosh.
V.C. Adcock, a band member in the early 1940s who went on to become a highly regarded band director in his own right, shares memories of Mr. Willis from the perspective of both student and colleague.
Well, he told me one time he had tryouts after marching season the first year he came. He said they had 13 alto saxophones in the band. And he says about 8 or 9 of them bit the dust when he had tryouts.
During the 1940s, Mr. Willis began taking the band to contests and was a founding member of the first professional association for band directors in East Tennessee. The video highlights the band's growth and development, a superior rating at the first ever concert festival in East Tennessee, and getting its first real uniforms, including some truly impressive hats. This unique photograph shows students presenting Miss Gresham with plaques the band had earned. The student on the right was Paul Sherbakoff.
Yeah, he had a sense of humor, and in fact, he cut an eraser at somebody on the back row one day just to make them shut up. He'd probably get a fine today, wouldn't he?
Yeah, we're not really supposed to do that.
I mean, it was accurate too.
Other highlights from the late 1940s include first place in a statewide concert contest, a change of directors, and new uniforms. In the 1950s, the documentary highlights the return of Odell Willis to Central.
I'm Joe Black, and I had the pleasure of being in Central High School Band from 1947 to 1951. First 2 years I was there, Mr. Luttrell was my band director, and then he left and Mr. Willis came on the scene. Well, we had heard an awful lot about Mr. Willis before he ever came. His discipline was second to none.
A building on campus was renovated as a new band room.
Because Odell, he designed it and planned it, and he wanted a lot of space in front of the band so that he wouldn't be crowded and you get better sound, you know. And yeah, that was his pride and joy.
1950 to 1953 All-State Band oboist Gene Collins remembers the high musical level of the band.
We were from Central, and there was nobody going to beat us. I don't see how. We had it all. The very finest bassoons, really, really quality double horns, 4-valve baritone. I mean, he had the best of everything.
More highlights from the 50s include an award-winning trip to Washington, D.C. and New York in 1954, and the dedication of the annual to Mr. Willis in 1956. University of Tennessee Band Director Emeritus Jay Julian was at Tennessee Tech in the 1950s and remembers well the Central Band of those years.
But I often went to Odell's concerts because they were outstanding, and Odell was a legend all over the States. He had one of the better bands in the country.
The 1950s conclude with a unique present for Mr. Willis. Memories from internationally acclaimed composer Richard Trithall.
Respect for him. I think as a professional who went on, the fact is that I come back and I think of what he taught me and what he said to me, and it's still Bible for me today.
And praise for Mr. Willis from longtime CHS choral director Charles Sanders.
But he coached me. I learned more from that man about teaching and about handling young people than all my experience in college.
The interview with Mr. Sanders also includes Charles Gowan and Donita Hedgepeth Barkley, two of his music theory students who in spring 1958 composed the school song, or Alma Mater. The full video for the 1960s shows the first female drum major, Beverly Towery Hundley. Knox County Band Director David Carell describes how he got his start at Central.
Are you sure you don't want to play this trumpet or this clarinet? Of course, I said, I was pretty emphatic about the tuba. So he says, well, I'll try to find you one. So sure enough, Mr. Willis went to the old Knoxville High School basement and found me an old E-flat, beat-up silver tuba.
and provided rare home movie footage of Odell Willis. As the 1960s were ending, women were finally allowed to march. Plans for construction of a new school campus were underway, and Odell Willis announced his retirement in spring 1971. His successor was Norman Woodall, who came in fall 1971 when the new building opened. The band flourished under his direction, despite the challenge of following the legend. The old high school became Gresham Junior High School. Gresham's first band director was Dwight Christian, who reminisces about Norman Woodall's start at Central.
He was a great band director. The students were the most important thing to Norman. He lived Central High School band.
The group played in spring 1975 for the Tennessee Music Educators Association Conference in Nashville and for the Southern Division Music Educators National Conference in New Orleans. The video includes short excerpts from the recording of one of these concerts. Joe Black remembers that the students realized what a true honor this was.
It was, and that was 75 was my junior year, and we had an incredible senior class where we had strong members in each section.
Highlights from the 1980s and 90s include interviews with former students Chris Alford, Michael Asbury, Jeff Mize, and Jeff Roberts.
One day we were rehearsing that piece of music, and Norman said, "Mike, I'm going to go back in the back and listen. Get up here and conduct this." So I did that. I got up and conducted the piece of music. He let me actually conduct that piece of music on the concert. That was cool. That was important.
Band is fun a lot of times, but if it's going to be fun, it's going to be fun because you've worked there and you've prepared it to be fun.
If it's going to be really good, it can't be fun
all the time. The way he handled discipline was in such a way that there was no question about it. He didn't have to tell you he was in charge. He didn't have to say, "I'm the band director and you'll do as I say." And he didn't have to say any of those things. He carried himself in such a way that you knew that without question. And the discipline he had was not forced. I don't think, literally, probably no more than 3 times did I ever hear him raise his voice. He didn't have to.
The video ends with the retirement of Norman Woodall in 1999, but has a brief update documenting the success of the band under current director Joshua Jackson. The band has again been honored by 2 invitations to perform at major state and national music conferences in spring 2006. Order forms will be available on the band's website at discoveret.org/CHSband. Order forms will also be available at the band concession stand at all Central home ball games, at the Gresham Middle School office, and at selected local music stores. This project would not have been possible without, of course, the incredible support of the alumni and administration of Central and Gresham. The Heritage Room, maintained by the Central High librarians, has been an invaluable resource as well. This community has been wonderful to me, and after 24 years, I'm pleased to present this documentary.
Well, that's the reason that we live where we do now, is trying to get zoned for the Central school systems. We want our kids to go to Central High School.
4th generation of Central Bank coming on down.
Maybe a first.
The Central High School Band story is far from over.